I designed the wedding of my dreams, and watched another woman walk down the aisle in it. They say betrayal has a face, but no one tells you it can wear your smile, your ring, and your future like it was never yours to begin with. That's what haunts me. Not just that he left, but that he let me build it all knowing I'd never be the bride. My name is Mariah. And once upon a time I thought I knew what love was. I thought it looked like Sunday mornings with coffee and laughter, like handwritten notes left on my desk, like a man who said all the right things. I thought love looked like Cole. I met him in a bookstore. Cliché, I know. I had a stack of novels in my arms and he reached out to steady me before I dropped them all. He was warm, confident, the kind of man who looked you straight in the eyes and made you forget what you were nervous about. We talked for hours over coffee that day. By the time I got home he'd already texted, "When can I see you again?" He made me feel chosen. Not just noticed, valued, cherished. And after a string of almost loves and broken promises, I clung to that feeling like a lifeline. He moved fast but I didn't mind. 3 months in he gave me a key to his apartment. 6 months in he said he loved me. A year later he proposed. He didn't do it with flash or spectacle, just one quiet night at home, pizza on the coffee table, candles flickering low. He knelt on the rug, held up a ring and said, "You're my home. Let's build the rest of our lives together." I said yes. Of course I said yes. From that moment on, I poured every ounce of my heart into planning the wedding. He told me to take the lead. "You've got such good taste," he'd say. I chose a vintage garden theme. Pale blue and ivory. Soft roses and hanging lanterns. I picked the venue, an ivy-covered stone chapel I'd loved since childhood. It was perfect. It felt like us. Or so I thought. I scouted caterers, wrote vows that made my mother cry, spent nights sketching table layouts and gift bags. He'd kiss my forehead and say how proud he was, how lucky he felt. But looking back, his eyes were always somewhere else. There were signs. I just didn't want to see them. He stopped wanting to be in photos. Dodged talks about our honeymoon. Took longer business trips and came home distracted. One time I found a receipt for a dinner I wasn't at. 2 entrees, wine, dessert. He said it was with a client. I nodded. But my heart, it started to sink. A week before the wedding, I had a dream that I was walking down the aisle and the groom wasn't there. I told him about it. He laughed it off and said, "I'll be there waiting, baby. Don't you worry." But I should have worried. The morning of our wedding, I woke up at 6 a.m. with butterflies in my stomach. My bridesmaids were buzzing around, curling hair and steaming dresses. I sent him a selfie with my morning coffee and the caption, "Can't wait to marry you." No response. I thought he was just getting ready. I told myself he was nervous, maybe emotional. What I didn't know, what none of us knew, was that while I was slipping into the dress I chose for our day, he was buttoning a tux to marry someone else. Not in another city. Not another weekend. That same day. In the same venue. I found out when my maid of honor's cousin, who worked at the venue, called in a panic. She told us someone else had shown up that morning with the same time slot and a full wedding party. The bride's name? Not mine. She sent a photo. There he was, Cole, standing at the altar in our venue, smiling down at a woman in a dress I'd never seen before. I thought it was a prank. I thought maybe it was a styled shoot or some cruel coincidence. But then the messages poured in. Friends sending me screenshots. Social media posts. Congratulations tagged to his name. And there was, the wedding hashtag #Fiancé. I went still. Like my body didn't know how to process the betrayal. I'd planned every detail. Paid every vendor. I picked the linens, the flowers, even the damn cake flavor. And he took it all, and gave it to her. I dropped my bouquet on the floor. I couldn't speak. Couldn't breathe. They had used my wedding. And he never planned to marry me at all. But what Cole didn't realize, what no one did, is that you don't leave a woman like me standing in ashes. Because ashes still spark. When you've spent a year building a dream with someone, it doesn't die clean. It rots slowly, wrapping itself around every plan, every conversation, every "I love you," until even your memories feel like lies. That night I didn't cry. I couldn't. I just sat there in my wedding dress, makeup untouched, while the world I had so carefully constructed turned to smoke. My friends didn't know what to say. My mother, bless her, tried to hold me, but I was frozen. I kept staring at the photo. His smile. Her veil. The same altar I'd dreamed of for months. What kind of man does that? What kind of woman marries someone knowing he was engaged to someone else that same day? My phone buzzed again. This time it was a text from Cole. I'm sorry. I never meant to hurt you. It got complicated. Complicated. That was his excuse for annihilating my heart, stealing my plans, and turning me into a living ghost. I didn't reply. I didn't scream. I didn't throw things. I didn't post a dramatic video online. I got up. I took off the dress I had once believed would change my life, and I hung it back up on the wooden hanger like it had never been touched. Then I curled into a ball on the floor and stayed there until the morning. The next few days blurred. Calls poured in. Messages. Sympathy and scandal all at once. Everyone wanted to know what happened. People asked if I was okay. Some even accused me of lying. Of being dramatic. Maybe he had a reason. Maybe you were too controlling. I stopped responding. But I didn't stop existing. Grief, when it's that raw, has a way of either crushing you or remaking you. At first I thought I'd vanish. I left the city, moved in with my aunt in Connecticut, and spent 3 months floating. I worked at a small coffee shop during the day and read novels at night just to stay sane. I didn't wear makeup. I didn't look in mirrors. I couldn't recognize the woman staring back at me, hollow-eyed and angry and empty. Slowly, I began to feel something stir. Not rage. Not even vengeance. Resolve. I started journaling again. Little things at first. A list of things I liked about myself. Then a list of things I'd forgotten I was good at. I wrote about how Cole made me feel small, how I dimmed my voice every time he spoke louder. How he called my dreams cute, and said I tried too hard. How I gave up a promotion to follow him to another state because he said it would be our time to shine. My time never came, but maybe it still could. I enrolled in a weekend entrepreneurship class at a local community center. I had always loved event planning, details, aesthetics, timelines. It gave me control when life didn't. I knew how to build beauty from chaos. So I started doing it for others. First, I helped a friend plan her baby shower. Then a neighbor's vow renewal. Then a small wedding in a backyard garden. Word spread faster than I expected. Within 5 months, I launched my own event design business from a tiny studio apartment I rented with my tips and savings. I called it Ash and Grace, because beauty can rise from ruin. Every table I set, every bouquet I arranged, every timeline I perfected, it all stitched something back together in me. I was no longer Mariah who got left. I was Mariah who created magic. And clients felt it. They trusted me. Because I had lived through the worst kind of broken, and I still believed in love enough to make theirs special. The pain didn't vanish overnight. I still woke up some days wondering how he could betray me so coldly. I still caught myself flinching when I saw men with the same haircut. But something else lived in me now. Fire. Focus. A version of myself I hadn't met before the heartbreak. And then, almost a year later, I got the email. Subject line: Venue Partnership Inquiry. I almost didn't open it. But when I did, my breath caught. The owner of Riverside Chapel, the very venue where I was supposed to get married, the one where Cole married her, was reaching out to offer me a permanent vendor partnership. They had heard about Ash and Grace through a bride I'd worked with the previous month. She wrote, "We've had a few reputation issues. You come highly recommended and we want to elevate the brand. Would you be open to a long-term contract?" I stared at the screen. Not just because of the irony, but because I realized, in that moment, I had built something so powerful, so respected, that even the place where my heart was shattered now wanted me to restore its glory. And I said yes. Not because I wanted to be near Ghost, but because this time I wouldn't be walking in as the forgotten bride. I'd be walking in as the woman who rose from the ashes with a clipboard in one hand and an empire in the making. The first time I walked back into Riverside Chapel as a professional, not a bride, my palms were sweating. I hadn't stepped foot in that place since the day my bouquet wilted in the sun while someone else wore the dress of my dreams, just with a different groom on her arm. But this time I wasn't wearing white. I wore a sleek navy pantsuit, heels that clicked like thunder across the polished marble floor, and confidence stitched into every seam. I wasn't here to weep. I was here to lead. The chapel manager, an elegant woman named Clarice, walked me through the venue talking about improvements, expansion, brand refresh. She didn't know the full story. Just that Ash and Grace had quickly become one of the most talked about design services in the region. "I've seen the way you handle your events," she said. "You don't just plan, you resurrect." Resurrect. That word sat heavy on my heart. Because that's what I had done. Not just with floral arrangements and candles, but with myself. I built a reputation on elegance, resilience, and discretion. My clients weren't just brides. They were dreamers. And I made those dreams tangible, even when my own had once been hijacked. It was after my third major contract with Riverside Chapel that I heard the rumor. Cole and his wife, Savannah, were taking a break. No details. Just whispers. I didn't care. I told myself I didn't care. But late at night I'd sometimes scroll through his social media. The polished honeymoon photos had vanished. So had the anniversary post. And then one day his profile picture was just him. Alone. I logged off and got back to work. By then Ash and Grace had taken off. I had 5 part-time staff, a growing list of preferred venues, and bookings stretching into the next year. I was featured in a local bridal magazine. Someone even tagged me in a TikTok review titled, "Why You Need Mariah for Your Wedding." Funny how life twists. Once I begged a man to choose me. Now clients begged me to take them on. But there were still lonely nights. The kind where silence echoes too loud and success feels like a beautiful cage. I was proud, yes, but I was also guarded. It felt like a language I'd forgotten how to speak. Then I met Nathan. It wasn't a movie moment. No rainstorm. No dropped grocery bags. Just 2 tired professionals seated next to each other at a business luncheon. He was quiet, respectful, warm. A tech consultant with a crooked smile and a heart that didn't need fixing. It just needed space to grow. We didn't fall fast. We unfolded. He never rushed me. Never made me feel like I had to shrink to fit beside him. The first time he told me I was beautiful, it wasn't because I wore makeup or dressed up. It was because I had spent the entire day coordinating a wedding that got rained out, and still made it magical. "You show up," he said. "Even when everything goes wrong. That's rare." We dated quietly for almost a year. No grand gestures. No public displays to prove anything to the world. Just us healing, laughing, building something real. And then during a winter evening he proposed. Not with fireworks or a rented orchestra. He just took my hand and said, "I want to build life with you, not just events." That's when I cried. Not because I needed a ring. But because, for the first time, someone saw the woman I became, not the broken one who was left behind. The wedding was small, private. A mountaintop retreat in Vermont. Only 30 guests. No drama. No ghosts. Just light snow, fresh pine, and a love that had been carved slowly, intentionally. I didn't invite Cole. But I didn't have to. Because weeks later he showed up, at Riverside Chapel of all places. I was prepping for a winter-themed ceremony. My assistant had just stepped out and I was adjusting the centerpieces when I heard the door creak. I turned. There he was. A little thinner. More tired. But still recognizable. Still him. He looked at me like I was a stranger. "Mariah," he said softly, like my name was both a question and a regret. I straightened. "Cole." He walked closer, hands in his pockets. "I've been following your work. You've really built something." I gave a polite nod. "Thank you." A beat of silence. Then, "She left," he said. "Savannah. 6 months ago." I didn't ask why. I didn't offer sympathy. I just waited. I thought, maybe we could talk. And that was when I smiled. Genuinely. "I don't think we have anything left to say." His eyes dropped to the ring on my finger. "So it's real then?" "Yes," I said. "It's finally real." He looked like he wanted to argue. Or apologize. Or beg. But he didn't. He just nodded slowly and walked away. I never saw him again. But that's the thing about karma. It doesn't always scream. Sometimes it walks out quietly, knowing the damage is done and the victory doesn't need to be shouted. Healing isn't always loud. Sometimes, it looks like making coffee in the morning without feeling like your chest is caving in. Sometimes it sounds like silence, not the aching kind but the kind that says peace has finally arrived. That was my life after marrying Nathan. Steady, quiet, whole. I wasn't racing to prove my worth anymore. I wasn't chasing after someone to see me. I had found someone who never stopped looking, not even when life got messy. And for the first time I wasn't just someone's fiancé, or the girl who got left at the altar. I was me. Fully. Unapologetically. But just when you think life has settled, it hands you a full circle moment. It came in the form of a phone call from a woman named Denise, an event coordinator at a prestigious venue in Manhattan. She was retiring and had been following my journey since I went viral on a design blog a year earlier. "I've seen your eye for detail, Mariah. You're not just a planner. You're an artist. How would you feel about taking over my client list?" I blinked, stunned. Her roster included celebrities, CEOs, and elite socialites. My calendar had been full before, but this was an entirely different level. I said yes. And just like that, Ash and Grace opened a second location in New York. I went from a woman who couldn't even step into a wedding chapel without shaking, to someone brides flew across the country to work with. One of my first high-profile clients in the city was the daughter of a tech mogul. A massive wedding. Rooftop garden venue. 30-piece orchestra. And, ironically, it was being partially funded by a firm I recognized instantly. The very same one Cole used to work for. I didn't think he'd show. I was wrong. 2 weeks before the wedding, during a final planning session, he walked in. Not as a guest. Not as a groom. As the junior assistant to the investment team. He was carrying a tray of waters. For a second he didn't see me. He was focused on not dropping the glasses. But when he finally looked up, everything stopped. His face paled. My hands didn't shake. I gave him a polite smile and turned back to my client. "Sorry," I said smoothly. "Shall we continue?" Later, one of the interns told me that after the meeting, Cole requested to be reassigned. He said he had conflicts with the vendor team. But I knew what that meant. It meant he couldn't stomach the taste of his own choices. And honestly, I didn't feel pity. I didn't feel triumph either. I felt done. He had finally become nothing more than a background character in the life I had written for myself. My focus was now on the women I mentored. The ones who walked into my studio with trembling voices, stories of betrayal, and dreams they were too afraid to say out loud. I saw myself in each of them. I told them they weren't broken, they were just in the middle of the story. And every story gets to have a new chapter. I built scholarships for underprivileged girls who wanted to enter design school. I hosted brunches for survivors of abandonment and heartbreak. My studio walls were covered in thank you notes, photos, and Polaroids of women who had risen from ashes just like I had. One afternoon I stood in that studio flipping through a vision board when Nathan walked in with takeout. He wrapped his arms around me from behind, kissed my shoulder, and whispered, "You built something no one can take from you." And he was right. Because success to me wasn't the magazine covers or the viral videos. It was this. The soft smile on my face. The quiet strength in my bones. The way my story didn't end in heartbreak but in becoming. He became a cautionary tale. The man who traded something real for something fleeting. I heard from a mutual acquaintance that Savannah, the woman he left me for, had married a European real estate heir. Apparently she and Cole lasted 6 months. He took what she wanted status and moved on. He lost 2 women. I only lost the illusion of love. And what I gained was worth everything. One rainy Saturday I was invited to give a TED-style talk on resilience and reinvention. I walked onto the stage, lights warm on my skin, heartbeat steady. The screen behind me read, "The blueprint for a beautiful comeback." I began not with facts but with truth. I planned a wedding once, but not my own. I spent months picking out the flowers, writing the vows, preparing for a love that wasn't mine to keep. And when the day came, the groom never showed, but the woman he did love did. That day nearly broke me. But it also built me. The crowd leaned in. I didn't rise out of revenge. I rose out of necessity. Because when everything else falls away, all you have is who you choose to become next. When the applause ended, I stood backstage watching the faces of women wiping tears and nodding quietly. I realized then, I wasn't just telling my story. I was telling ours. They say closure is a myth. That you don't get it from the people who hurt you, you create it yourself. But I learned something else too. Sometimes life does circle back. Not to reopen wounds but to show you how far you've come. It was a crisp autumn afternoon when I got the invitation. Embossed, thick as a brick with a gold seal. At first I thought it was from one of my high-end clients. But when I saw the return address I froze. It was from Cole's company. Or rather, his former company. The same firm that once celebrated him as a rising star was now rebranding and wanted me as a keynote speaker for their Women's Leadership Gala. I reread the card 3 times just to be sure. This wasn't a mistake. My name was printed in bold. The title? The Power of Redemption and Reinvention. A Conversation with Mariah Blake. There it was. Full circle. Not just surviving the man who left me shattered, but standing on the stage of the world that once propped him up, now as the voice they wanted to hear from most. I said yes. Not for revenge. Not to be petty. But because I knew there'd be someone in that crowd, maybe just one woman, who was standing where I had stood in the aftermath of betrayal, thinking she wouldn't make it. And I needed her to see that she could. The night of the gala, the ballroom was bathed in gold. Cameras flashed. Powerful women floated between tables draped in velvet and glass. I wore a sleek black dress, minimal jewelry, and a smile that came from peace, not performance. Nathan walked me to the entrance, kissed my hand and whispered, "This is your moment. Own it." And then I walked inside alone, on purpose. As I took the stage I scanned the room. And there, near the back, half-shadowed in a row of junior associates, sat Cole. He hadn't seen me yet. When the host introduced me, the room applauded. I stepped to the microphone and locked eyes with the audience, not him. My story was no longer about him, and it never needed to be. I spoke about rebuilding from the ruins. About turning shame into strategy. About how being left at the altar didn't destroy me, it delivered me to myself. I watched people nod. Some cried. A few stood. Cole stayed seated. After the talk I mingled. People introduced themselves with tears and praise. One young woman, an intern, pulled me aside and said, "I was engaged. He cheated. I thought I'd never recover. But now, I think maybe I can." That was worth more than applause. But life, being what it is, wasn't finished. Later that night, as the crowd thinned, I felt someone approach quietly behind me. I turned and there he was. Cole. He looked different. Older. Not just in his face but in his energy. Like life had taken its pound of flesh. "Mariah," he said softly. "You were incredible tonight." I nodded. "Thank you." He hesitated, then added, "I've been following your career. Watching everything you've built. I wanted to reach out, but I didn't know how." "You just did," I said calmly. He looked down, nervous. I'm sorry. For everything. For what I did. For how I did it." There it was. The apology I thought I wanted years ago. But it didn't land the way I imagined. Because I didn't need it anymore. "I used to lie awake waiting for those words," I said quietly. "But the truth is, you gave me a gift. Maybe not the kind wrapped in kindness, but a gift nonetheless. You made me meet the woman I was always meant to become." He looked like he wanted to say more. Maybe he wanted forgiveness. Maybe he wanted something else entirely. But I wasn't giving anything more than closure. Not for him. For me. "I'm happy now," I said. "And I hope you find that too." Then I turned. Walked away. This time I didn't need a dramatic ending. No tears. No confrontation. Just the sound of heels clicking toward the next chapter. Weeks later that chapter arrived. A call came in from Vogue Weddings. They wanted to feature me on the cover of their spring edition. Not as a stylist. Not as a planner. But as a visionary. A woman who redefined what resilience looked like. When the issue launched, my photo covered half the newsstand. Dressed in white. Not as a bride but as a brand. I stood in front of the display with Nathan holding hands. "You know," he said, "if Cole ever sees this, he's going to choke on his morning coffee." I laughed. Let him. I earned every inch of this. And I had. Not by seeking revenge. Not by proving anyone wrong. But by finally living as if no one else's opinion could define me. Success is loud when it's born from silence. When Cole left me, I was quiet. I didn't shout. I didn't beg. I didn't demand answers from the sky or try to claw my way back into a heart that never truly held me. I simply vanished from his world and built my own. A world where my name meant something. Where my voice filled boardrooms, not bridal registries. Where the only vows I needed were the ones I made to myself. Never settle, never shrink, never forget who you are again. I never went back to planning weddings. Instead, I launched my own lifestyle brand. It started with custom stationery, therapeutic in a way. Designing beautiful invitations not for weddings, but for women reclaiming their power. I quit. I moved on. I chose me. Those were my first 3 bestsellers. From there, the business exploded. Speaking engagements, podcasts, brand collaborations. I hired women who had stories like mine. We didn't just create aesthetics. We created movements. I bought my first townhouse in Brooklyn. It had white shutters, crown molding, and a balcony that caught the morning sun. Every time I stepped into that space, I reminded myself, this was not the life he didn't give me. This was the life I gave myself. And when love came again, it didn't feel like rescue. It felt like respect. Nathan and I met at a leadership summit. He didn't know my story. He just knew I made him laugh. He didn't ask about my past, he asked about my goals. And when I told him I wasn't interested in rushing anything, he said, "Good. Neither am I. I want to build something real." We didn't fall in love fast. We built it slow, like a home with no blueprint. Just 2 people willing to work and trust and show up for each other every day. He didn't replace the dream I had with Cole. He gave me an entirely new one. 2 years later, we got married in a quiet garden ceremony. 25 guests. Barefoot vows. A jazz trio. No bridal drama. Just peace. And this time, no one else planned the wedding but me. There were no whispers of betrayal. No fear lingering behind my smile. Just the soft certainty that I had finally made it. Not because of who stood next to me, but because of who I had become before he arrived. And then, life surprised me again. I walked into one of my flagship stores one Friday afternoon, casually checking on the new layout, when I heard a familiar voice. Rougher now. Slower. Cole. He stood near the back of the store, flipping through one of our signature journals. The one titled, "Her Silence Was Her Revolution." He didn't see me right away. I stood there for a moment watching him. There was no bitterness in me, no fury waiting to rise. Just curiosity. He eventually looked up and froze. We locked eyes. "Mariah," he breathed, almost like a question. I smiled. "Cole." He looked around the store, clearly realizing whose empire he had just stepped into. "This is yours." "All of it," I said. He swallowed. "I heard about your success. I didn't expect to see you like this." "Happy?" I asked. He nodded, too ashamed to say it aloud. He started to speak, maybe to offer another apology, maybe to rehash old ghosts. But I cut him off gently. "I'm glad you came in," I said. "It's always good to see where the story could have ended, and how far past that I've gone." I didn't need to hurt him. He was already living with the shadow of his choices. And I was standing in the light of mine. He left without buying anything. And I didn't look back. That night, I walked through the city with Nathan, hand in hand, laughing about a toddler throwing cake in our cafe. The world was loud and alive, and for the first time in forever, I wasn't afraid to be seen. Not as someone recovering, but as someone arrived. I looked up at the skyline and thought about that girl who once sat alone in a wedding dress, crying on the cold tiles of a bridal suite. She didn't lose. She rose. So here's what I'd say to anyone still standing in the ashes of betrayal. Don't wait for them to explain why they broke you. Don't search for closure in people who found comfort in your pain. Write your own ending. Live it boldly. And let your success be the loudest silence they'll ever hear. If you've ever been underestimated, betrayed, or left behind, only to rise higher than anyone ever expected, this story was for you. Don't forget to like, drop your thoughts in the comments, share it with someone who needs this reminder, and subscribe for more stories that prove karma always keeps the score.